Morgan. I'm Arlington's environmental planner and conservation agent. The May 1st, 2025 public meeting of the Arlington Conservation Commission will be conducted in a remote format consistent with an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, which further extends certain COVID-19 measures regarding remote participation in public meetings until June 30th, 2027. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording may be made publicly available. All of our meeting materials are the link I've just put in the chat. Please note that the Zoom chat feature may be used for questions and comments that contribute to the Commission's procedures, and if it's used otherwise, it may be disabled at the chair's discretion. Public comment period will follow each hearing. Tonight we don't have any hearings, but we always welcome attendees to ask questions and offer comments during the public comment period. Can be extended to other topics at the chair's discretion as well. Chuck Tirone is our commission chair. He'll facilitate tonight's meeting, and we always take votes using a roll call vote. So over to you, Chuck, to do the agenda.
Yeah, I'll review the agenda. So Thursday, May 1st, 2025. We're going to start out with just reviewing our minutes. And then we have fishing line impact, and we'll talk about e-permits and then the floodplain regulations. We'll get an update from the Water Bodies Working Group, CPA, Tree Committee, and Sims Conservation Restriction. We have a hearing on the agenda, and it's 995 Mass Ave. There's a note on it that says it's going to be continued to June 19th. With that, I will turn to tonight's attendance. Susan Chapnick.
Here.
Nathaniel Stevens.
Here.
David Kaplan.
Here.
David White.
Here.
Brian McBride.
Here.
Mike Gildesgame.
Present.
And Chuck Tirone is here. Associate members Sarah Alfaro Franco.
Present.
And Eileen Coleman. Okay, not seeing Eileen in the meeting right now, so just let us know if Eileen comes into the meeting. And with that, we can turn to our first agenda item, and I'll throw it back to David for a review of the meeting minutes.
These are meeting minutes from April 3rd of this year, and I received edits from Nathaniel Stevens. First up, since we were meeting in a hybrid format, I just recently learned, Nathaniel, that you need to designate who is in person and who is remote to adhere to the open meeting law. So thank you for taking care of that for these minutes. The only changes that are here are some elaboration on the enforcement order at 335 Mystic, mostly clarifying language. And then Nathaniel cleaned up a little bit of the hearing for 15 Ryder Street, also just elaborating, like what NOAA++ means and so on and so forth. Fairly straightforward edits. And I guess that's it. Any further edits?
David, you might want to, just to be totally clear, you might want to put in parentheses behind the people who were in person. You might, for Chuck and Susan, just to be sure. There's no doubt.
Motion to approve is edited.
Need a second?
Second.
Second, Nathaniel Stevens. Susan Chapnick.
Yes.
David White.
Yes.
Brian McBride.
Well, I wasn't there, so I'll skip, abstain.
Nathaniel Stevens,
Yes.
David Kaplan,
Yes.
and Chuck Teroni says yes.
I
April
also
3rd.
say yes.
Who was that?
Mike.
Michael.
Oh, I thought I went through you. Oh, Brian threw me off. Sorry. And sorry to blame you, Brian. Okay, we got them all. We're April 3rd minutes are approved.
And
Next.
just a quick point of order too, Brian, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you can vote on the minutes even if you weren't present, so.
I did hear that before. Yeah, I just feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know.
Sure. No, thank you.
All right. On to number 2 on our agenda, which is discussions. And the first thing up under discussions is the fishing line impact. And if we have people here to talk about that tonight, could you be allowed on the screen and introduce yourself for the record? And
Sure. I'm just putting myself on the screen. My name is Laura Kiesel. I'm an Arlington resident and I am the founder and director of Save Arlington Wildlife.
hi, Laura.
Hi.
Is anyone else with you tonight?
Yeah, I think there are a few like supporters here as well.
Okay. Do you have a presentation for us, or is this just going to be?
I do have a presentation if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me, hopefully I didn't close it on my window. Share my screen. Okay, so, can people see that?
Yes.
Okay, let me go to the, unfortunately, that's like midway through, so let me scroll back up to the beginning. And for some reason, it keeps going back to that slide. So, I've been sort of interested in somewhat active, but a little bit more in the background on this issue since 2021. There was this incident where this female mallard was spotted several times with a bobber and hook, and I tried with the then ACO Diane Welch for weeks to try to capture her. It was impossible. You can't see it, but in addition to that bobber and hook, she had the line wrapped around her wing. I think you can sort of see toward the like blue part of her wing, that the bit of the line sticking out. We were never able to capture. What?
I don't think we're seeing the duck.
Laura, is it possible for you to send that quickly to David Morgan and he could possibly put it up for us?
Oh, you're not seeing the slides?
No, we see one slide, but it's just a collection of bobbers and lines on the beach.
What is it doing? I don't
Just a
understand.
photo. Yeah, it's just an image. It's a JPEG. So
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. So do you want me to share this with you, David? So you can put it up?
Or you could try unsharing your stop sharing and
Yeah,
then
I'll stop
resharing again.
sharing and see if I can share again.
Yeah, if you have 2 screens, that sometimes works.
Okay.
Hit the right
I'm also
window to share.
closing all my other windows. Wait 1 second. Yeah. Can you help me? My partner's a technical guy, so he's gonna try to.
Unshare first.
Yeah, if you stop sharing, if you go to the top of the screen, I think it should give and hover around the top of the screen if you're on a
There.
PC.
I got it.
There we go.
Can you help me
Then pick
when I
different.
do share? Just wait 1 second. My partner is camera shy, so I'm just gonna turn.
Pick the slideshow window.
While she's getting that.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
here we go.
Now we can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks for your patience. I thought I had hit that one, but I guess I didn't.
Click on slideshow too. Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, I don't want to rehash too much of what I just said, but that's a picture of the duck I was talking about with the bobber and its wing, a hook. And you can sort of see the little bit of the line sticking out at the bottom of its wing near where the blue part is at the tip. So we worked for weeks trying to get that duck until she disappeared. And unfortunately, it's assumed that the line probably eventually cut through her wing and she probably perished. And I know around this time, 2021, there was a fishing line working group formed. I was not a part of that. I think a couple of people who were are here tonight. And I know they had a lot of great ideas, but I don't think a lot of them were enacted. So our ponds and waterways, especially Hills Pond at Menominee Rocks Park, is home to a lot of wildlife and residential and migratory, including a lot of fish-eating birds. All these pictures, the first 3 are taken from Hills Pond at Menominee Rocks Park in the past year. The one at the end is an osprey, not at Hills Pond, but another Arlington waterway. And these animals are especially susceptible to ingesting line because they eat the fish. A lot of the same species that are the most vulnerable to the fishing line entanglement are also many of the species that are also the most vulnerable to avian flu. And we've been hit really hard around the whole Boston metro area with avian flu, including Arlington. And these are just several photos of the birds I've been seeing this year that have perished in Arlington of avian flu, including cormorants, swans. I've also seen geese and a great blue heron. Hills Pond and our other waterways are also home to other species other than just waterfowl and birds that are also susceptible to fishing line waste, including turtles, muskrats, and even land mammals that do pass through. Again, both of these photos were taken at Hills Pond in the past year or so, and are at the cattail area, which I'm pointing out because I'm going to get back to that like part of the pond later. I spoke with the Turtle Rescue League of Massachusetts the other day. They're actually endorsing this effort to try to put a pause on fishing at Hills Pond. They told me that fishing line hook and waste accounts for the top third reason they get intakes of turtles, as well as compromises a third of all their patients. That fishing line is the leading cause of loss of limbs in both turtles and waterfowl. And she was even mentioning that, a lot of times people stigmatize or blame snapping turtles when they see waterfowl or other birds that don't have their legs, but it's usually because that line is so strong it wraps around and eventually cuts through their limbs. And the director also noted that the threats posed by fishing gear waste are significantly magnified and much more common in small ponds. So the smaller the pond, the greater the risk of these kind of injuries. And they also noted that more than half of the turtles that they x-ray, they'll find fishing hooks or waste inside their bodies, even if that's not the reason that they became a patient. But obviously that's a comorbidity that compounds the problem and impedes their chances of recovery. And that's an example at the side. Raptors are also very susceptible to fishing line waste. This picture that you see on the right, this was actually taken just last year, right the town next door in Lexington at, I think, their old reservoir. And the problem is raptors are, well, they're getting a double whammy of avian flu, but they're also pretty much the most common victims of rodenticide poisoning. Rodenticide poisoning makes animals more susceptible to fishing line entanglement, but it also makes them more susceptible to bleeding out once they get entangled. So it can be really hard for them to recover or survive an ordeal like this. So my interest in this was resurrected last fall because I was walking around Spy Pond. I heard this ear-splitting scream of an animal, and it turned a juvenile night heron on the shores of Spy Pond. It was wrapped all around with fishing line, and it had a hook basically impaling its wing and sticking its wing into its upper thigh. It took almost an hour and 4 of us to try to get this animal free because it was also entangled in some shrubs. So the line was entangled around the shrubs. I actually was terrified that this animal was going to die just of stress because it was reacting so viscerally to us. And it kept trying to escape through the hedges and was straining against its wing. So we were worried it might have broken its wing. And these animals are so high stress that they can actually die sometimes during rescues. and they can be dangerous to rescue. So you have waterfowl that are very difficult to rescue until they're basically on death's door. But certain animals like cormorants and herons, their bills can be pretty formidable and cause a lot of damage if you don't have the proper PPE. So not just anyone can rescue them. I had to wear goggles and special gloves, and I was still nervous because she kept going at my face like a velociraptor the whole time until I got her in the box. So that really can make it really hard to save these animals when they get in this ordeal. And that's just a picture when I took her to the rehabber and they took the barbs out. You can see how many of them, and it tore her tendon in her leg. Now, this is a migratory species, and this was in mid-October, so she almost missed that migratory window. And Tufts Wildlife Clinic almost had to put her to sleep just because, again, they're such a high-stress species. They can't be overwintered in captivity. They'll usually just die of stress. So they noted that if they didn't release her, she was just going to have to be euthanized. So she recovered enough, but it was a bit of a gamble, they said, but they thought she might make it. So they released her at Spy Pond, but it could have easily gone the other way. And only a week after that incident occurred, someone photographed a great blue heron at Hills Pond that was swallowing a fish that was still attached to a hook, line, and bobber. She got it right as the bobber was going down, and then that heron immediately flew off. And so without intervention, that heron died. You know, there's no way you survive that without medical intervention. So these incidents seem to be increasing in frequency and severity as far as we know. And that's why I think we're having a more urgent call to do something more aggressive. This is a typical day's haul at Menominee Rocks Park. There are many of us who volunteer just on our own, and I know several of the friends of Menominee Rocks Park. They go out almost every day and they'll pick this stuff up. And even with that, they can't keep up because it's so much, and there's a lot of it they can't reach. You need special equipment. There are a lot of bobbers in the trees. There's one branch like that on the far right where it was like 9 bobbers, and this was just from Friday. And someone, even with that special equipment, couldn't get it, couldn't chop that part off because the scissors wouldn't cut through. And I counted overall about 20 bobbers. I think it was technically 19, just from that one walk around. And most of them are caught up in the trees. I have this volunteer, he's an angler, so he has a lot of this specialized equipment. So some of the things he was noted when he did a walkthrough at Hills Pond and tried to get as much as he could this weekend is that bobbers really shouldn't be used in that kind of pond. He said that that's more for stock salmon, and it could be really dangerous to the fish themselves and cause a lot of swallowed hook and something called gut hooking. And of course, if an animal's going to eat that, like a heron, that's going to go up the food chain and those hooks are going to be passed into them. He said that many recreational fishers are unsupervised minors between 8 and 12. I have to say that I've noted that as Hills Ponds too, Hills Pond as well. Cleaning this waste, again, requires really specialized equipment. It's expensive. It can require superior shoulder strength, and there's a risk of injury. I myself, not even using those specialized equipment, have gotten hooked, have gotten cut, have gotten like the line caught on my hands. And the thing is, a lot of these lines, especially the braided line and the leader lines, they're so thick, they're made to resist cutting, you know, so fish can't bite through them. So even scissors usually don't work for cutting the line. So instead, you're forced to trim the tree branches instead. And he even noted that the fish are under so much pressure at Hills Pond, it again being such a tiny pond, that it's not a pond that he would fish at. I spoke to the coach of the female crew team when they were coming in from Spy Pond, and she noted that fishing line has been an issue for them, that it's gotten caught in their paddles, that sometimes it gets on their boat and they have to clean it off, but they said it has gunked up their paddles several times. And she said on more than one occasion, they've had to stop because they've noticed songbirds caught up in line along the shore. And she said she even released a sparrow recently that was screaming and hanging upside down. But really all it takes is one line. And this is one line that I took a couple of weeks ago that was hanging down from tree in Hills Pond to lead to a dead animal. So 2 weeks ago, a great blue heron at Menominee Rocks Park got entangled with line and died. It had the hook through its wing and the line was wrapped around its feet And I know that there have been some efforts to try to mitigate the issue, but unfortunately, it just hasn't done much. So I know recycling receptacles have been piloted a couple of times. I think the last time was in 2022. From what I heard from friends in Menotomy Rocks Park, they were barely used and it didn't make any noticeable reduction in the amount of fishing line waste in and around the pond. Basically, those pictures I showed earlier, they were still collecting that much every day. And the other thing is those recycling receptacles do not address the issue of snag lines in trees. And that seems to be the lion's share of the waste there. And I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but as we know, like, you know, the fishing line is plastic. So even if we're recycling it, it's not a panacea. The fishing line can take 400 to 6,000 years to biodegrade. It breaks down to microplastics. It's not recycled, it's downcycled. And these plants that do the recycling are almost always located in low-income communities of color that then have to shoulder the health burdens of that recycling. And something I didn't know until I researched this further recently was that many types of these fishing lines also contain PFAS in them. So that pollution is probably also being added to the pond with this waste. And we all know about ocean waste. And I think a lot of times people think that, you know, they think all of that waste is plastic bags, styrofoam, and that's true. That does comprise a good chunk of it, but the vast majority of the plastic garbage patch is from fishing waste. And even though a lot of it is from commercial fisheries in the ocean, they actually found that a substantial amount of it is from individual recreational fishers from freshwater bodies that makes its way eventually to the ocean. And that, you know, as part of that plastic, fisheries plastic, that makes up like about 80 to 86% of the waste. Just concentrating for a couple of minutes on Hills Pond. Hills Pond, due to its very small size, is very susceptible to climate change, in particular, like algae blooms, which seem to be becoming more and more common. As you guys probably know even better than I do, it seems like every summer now there's at least one algae bloom. And also is becoming more susceptible to drought. So the last 2 out of 3 years, including this last summer and fall, we had record-setting drought. And I observed that a significant portion of the pond dried up near the cattails. It looked like at least a quarter or more had dried up. And 2022, it also had a drought, and I noticed part of it dried up. So this is becoming more the norm. Or you get a summer like the summer of 23, where you get like storms, record-setting storms, and wet summers where there's more flooding. And so I've noticed in some other ponds nearby, like in Lexington, this is Lock Pond at Whipple Hill, like this pond dried out completely this past drought, and there was like a major fish kill, hundreds of dead fish and tadpoles in that area. That fisheries kind of collapsed. That puddle you see there, that was gone the following week. And, you know, I reported it to the Lexington Conservation Commission, but I have concerns that, you know, that could happen with Hills Pond. And so what I would like, one thing I hear is that, you know, if you're having a lot of snagged lines from fishing, that one major way to mitigate that is to cut back the treescape, which I don't think Conservation Commission would even okay, but I also just want to say I would be concerned about that even if it was okay, because again, of how susceptible that pond is to drought, to algae breaks, to flooding, that the tree canopy offers some resilience for. If anything, I would like to see us shore up vegetation and shade rather than cut it back, but I don't see how to do that and reconcile it with this issue of increased snagging in trees, snagging in vegetation that then can kill our wildlife. And I had spoken to a fisherman who even has noted this, like he said that it's really advisable to not fish under the treescape because it is inevitable that it'll cause snag line and wildlife injuries. And he looked at this map and he circled that part and he said, I think this is the perfect place for fishing, and that's that area near the cattails. But I told him, well, that's the part that was completely dried out last fall or summer, so people couldn't fish there, A. So they were still going to go under the tree canopy area. But B, what I've noticed, again, even just this last weekend, was I counted almost a half a dozen bobbers in the cattails. So that seems to be an entanglement issue as well. That's just about the summer being more flooding and how the trees act to sort of be an umbrella and help protect small ponds when they're dealing with that. So what Save Arlington would like to consider is a pause on recreational fishing at Hills Pond. We do have a petition. Currently, we have well over 100, I think about 120 signatures. We just started collecting in the past. We premiered it at Echo Fest. And for someplace like Spy Pond, I would like to see, perhaps maybe more designated fishing areas, like areas where fishing is encouraged and areas where maybe it's discouraged or not allowed. Again, maybe those areas that are under treescape, combined with things like better signage, recycling receptacles so that at least they're being disposed of, because I do also see people trying to throw the line in the trash, even when the trash is overflowing. Sorry, I'm just looking. There was one other point I had. Yeah, so recycling receptacles, signing, and increased cleanups, and perhaps an education pilot by the town to raise awareness on this issue. But the thing with Hills Pond is it's just so small. I don't even think that would work. I think with Spy Pond, there's a lot more opportunity. I've had people mention, with Spy Pond, you can go out on boats and get away from the tree line. There are more areas that are not under overhanging trees. There are more areas to educate there. But Hills Pond is just so very small that basically any of those things I see just sort of compounding the issue. I know someone mentioned, why don't we create a dock? And I was like, well, if you create a dock, in addition to the fact that that itself, I feel like would infringe on very marginalized wildlife habitat, I feel like that would lead to crowding in that one area. And I don't think that you can just restrict the fishing to that area. I think people are still going to go to other parts of the pond under treescape, especially if it's hot and they want shade. If there was a pause on Hills Pond, I would like to see, actual enforcement of it, because one pushback I do get, even people who would like to see a pause, is they're wary that it would be enforced, and then that might even compound the issue, or it'll either go on as status quo or maybe even get worse. So I think this is an opportunity to tie it to existing enforcements on bylaws we have, such as not feeding waterfowl or having your dogs on leash in certain parts of Menotomy Rocks Park, both of also which I think would benefit the wildlife at those areas. Because I do just want to say at Spy Pond, I've noticed a lot of people, especially kids, they go to those areas behind the fence or stone barricade, and they're either fishing, and there's a lot of fishing line there. So I don't even think you're allowed to be there, because obviously it's fenced or barricaded no matter what, but maybe there could be enforcement to keep people out of that area so that they're not fishing or doing other things. There's this area between the softball field and Spy Pond condos behind the fence, where there are kids all the time, and I'm seeing, this is from just this weekend, but it's been there for months, and it's growing. There's like a bench, there's stools. Every time I go by, there's empty snack bags and bottles. And even one time there was a skinned animal, and I don't even know what that was about. I did report it to the town. There's empty glue sticks. So there's also a lot of other plastic waste I'm worried is getting washed into the pond. And they fish there too sometimes, and I've noticed stag line. So I think this is an opportunity to combine efforts on those other risks too. And this is like my last slide, but as you can see on that left picture, like I come across this fairly often, especially when the trash is overflowing, people just throw their line out like that, but all it would take is one stiff wind to blow that line into the water or into the park somewhere. So I think there's more opportunities to address that there. Oh, and this is my last slide. This is just some pictures of signage and they're very small, so I don't think people even realize that some of these things are a problem. A lot of people don't realize, like, don't feed the waterfowl. That one thing on this, that's the one sign about fishing line waste at Spy Pond. And I can't even see what those pictures are. They're so small, and they're in that like little bulletin board that's by the boat dock. So I do think there's opportunities for more effective signage there. I can stop my share now.
Sure. Thank you, Laura. That was a good presentation. Does anyone on the commission have any questions at this moment? I think I wanted to go to Mike Gillisgame myself. So Mike, take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. That was a very good comprehensive description of the issues. I think that the problem at Hills Pond, which I'm quite familiar with, as you mentioned, is that there are, on any given day in the afternoon or during the day, there are 6, 8, 10 people fishing. I don't know if they're catching anything or what they may be catching in that little puddle, but it seems to me that there is a lot of gear out there as well that they brought with them. And I don't know what the best approach would be, but I think that pausing fishing or restricting fishing is going to be met with some serious opposition, would be my guess. And I think it's a matter of education as well that we need to combine to see if we can fix this problem to some extent. But thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Nathaniel Stevens.
Thanks. Yeah, I echo Laura, I echo Mike's thanks for your compelling presentation, and also share his concern that there will be a bit of pushback on this. You mentioned that there had been a fishing line working group set up by the town a few years ago. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah.
And how many do your recommendations differ from what they recommended, or is there some overlap, or did they?
There's some overlap, and I think two of them, the people who are involved with that, including the person who chaired it, is here. So she would probably be better equipped to answer that. But obviously some of the recommendations, like, you know, for Spy Pond, better recycling receptacles, but it would have to be matched with good awareness, because otherwise you just
Right.
put them there and they're not going to be used. Or, you know, a cleanup, I think that would actually take funding and like DPW helping, because again, some of that stuff we can't reach. So some of
Right.
it overlaps, but I will say I don't think they were asking for a pause, but both of the people from that group have supported this petition. And though I do expect some pushback, I will have to say that by and large it's been very supportive. I premiered this at EchoFest. Only one person that whole shift had had any pushback. Like I said, we have well over 100 signatures, and I haven't shared it like largely yet. And I was
Sure.
surprised that several anglers, I think even your Arlington, went there and they asked a random fisher person, like, what do you think? And he's like, you know, I could live with it being prohibited here as long as it's not being prohibited everywhere. He even said this is not an ideal place to fish. It always gets, my line always gets snagged. So yeah,
Sure. And my next question is, I'd like to, before yeah, it'd be great if some of the working group members could speak to answer my question, but I also want to ask you, Laura, I think I met you at a Park and Rec Commission meeting. After one meeting, you and I chatted briefly, but I was wondering what interaction have you had with the Park and Rec Commission or the director about this topic?
Yeah, so well, I've had some past ones, like back in 2021 when the group was getting formed. I had emailed them several times after dealing with that duck. I then resuscitated that effort last fall after I rescued the black crowned night heron. And I said I would like the town to adopt some more aggressive policies. And nothing much really happened. And David Morgan, he could tell you, I reached out to him. I know I reached out to, I think, the Open Space Committee. I reached out to several bodies.
Okay.
When the great blue heron died 2 weeks ago, I reached out to Natasha Whedon. She read a public comment at that Parks and Rec meeting. And then I was on the agenda just 2 nights ago, and I basically gave almost the same presentation.
And what was the reaction of the Park and Rec Commission? Since it is, you know, as you know, they manage the park,
Yeah.
Spy Pond Park, and most of Monotony Rocks Park.
It was pretty positive. You know, it was a packed room, though. I don't think that it was just this issue. They were also discussing pickleball that night. But
Yes, I'm sure you got
But
overwhelmed. Yeah.
I got really excited. I was like, wow, this is really popular. And we did have quite a few people, but the pickleball people, I think it was like 2-1 for every one of us.
Right,
It was like a
right,
pickleball
sure.
person. But I
Yeah.
have to say, every single person who offered public comment supported, and I've even heard back from several of the pickleballers who were there who signed the petition and are now like really into this issue. Parks and Rec itself was pretty engaged seeming, and they asked a lot of questions. They did ask like me to look into like what other ponds, do they restrict fishing at? What were those circumstances? So I've just started to do a little bit of that research.
Okay.
Like I thought of Black Snook in Cambridge, and I know that's a little different because it's an offshoot of Fresh Pond, which is drinking water, but that itself is wildlife habitat. So we did discuss briefly, Wood Hills Pond, could that be designated wildlife habitat? And that could be something we could look to build going into the future if we did adopt a fishing pause that became a mainstay there. But it was just very temporarily floated, and then they told me to go do more research.
Okay, and then come back. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Chuck, if you don't mind, could we hear from some of the former chair of the
Yes.
working group? I'd be curious to see what happened or why things didn't happen before. Thanks.
Yeah, can you turn your microphone on, introduce yourself for the record?
Hi, this is Beth Malofchuk. I apologize, my camera doesn't work on this computer. I was the chair of the fishing line working group. Ellen Kravitz is also here. She was also a member. We had a mix of environmentalists and people who fish. And for the record, I'd like to say that I grew up fishing on Lake Mohawk in Sussex County, New Jersey. So I'm a fishing supporter. I was horrified when I saw the drowned heron in Hills Pond 2 weeks ago. I was there for a walk. I frequently walk there.
Sorry, Beth. Yeah, sorry, just because we have a long evening. I was just wanting to get more history on how was your working group formed? By what, did the select board appoint you? Did you report back to anyone? What were your recommendations? That's really all I'm asking for, I think. Yeah.
Joe Conley, I think I saw a sign saying that one was forming, and so I reached out to what the contact was, and it was Joe Connolly, and he just appointed me chair. And
Okay, all right. Yeah.
I think there was
Lucky you. Yeah.
I think there was about 8 or 10 of us.
And how often did you meet?
I don't recall. It was 2 or 3 years ago. It was during COVID. Anna Henkin, I recall Anna Henkin was on it. There was a member of Friends of Monotony Rocks Park was on it, a gentleman. There were I don't remember. But
and then did you guys report back to Joe or to present to Park and Rec?
We took minutes, and I reported back to Joe. And as a result of our meetings, the PVC periscopes, which you saw, at least one was installed at Monotony Rocks Park. We were very happy and proud that Matt in the recreation office figured. We all studied where they were used and how they were constructed, and then Matt actually made that. So that was
great.
It was a nice thing for his office and everything, and for us.
Did you have any other recommendations that were implemented by the town?
They did post signs, and it was showed, I think, maybe at Park and Rec, I can't remember. But it was an array of photos, and the photos were so small they weren't really, I think, effective.
Yeah, I think Laura had a slide of that, the one that's posted at Spy Pond. So yeah, we did see that.
Okay, so yeah, so we posted that.
Okay. But as far as you know, Park and Rec didn't implement any other recommendations that you guys may have had?
Not beyond the periscope and posting of, please pick up your discarded fishing line.
Okay, thanks. No, that's helpful. I appreciate it. I've taken more than amount of my time. I think Chuck, I think Brian and Susan were there. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Let's go to Brian McBride.
Oh yeah, thanks, Chuck. So yeah, I'm a frequent visitor to Hills Pond, and my son is a big fisherman, so sympathetic to the situation here. But my impression is this really isn't acceptable. You know, the situation is really not tolerable, and I think we need to do something dramatic soon to underline that to the public. I think there's a big aspect of this, which is behavior, and probably of some younger people in the community. I think a clear message that this is not acceptable probably needs to be sent, followed by maybe some best practices and some regulations from our town or others' towns to go forward. It's very clear to me, Laura, from your presentation, we need to do something here. So thank you for it. That's all I had.
All right, Brian. And Susan Chapnick.
Thank you, Chuck. Again, Laura, thank you for bringing the presentation to us. I'm frustrated because I was aware of the fishing working group. I've had conversations with Ellen Kravitz, who was instrumental on that fishing working group. I've walked Monotony Rock Park for years. I saw the PVC pipe was not used at all. I have neighbors who are avid fishermen, fishermen and fisherwomen who are youngsters, teenagers, and they're very careful about their line, and they went there with me once to do a walk around the pond and were appalled. So the way I view this, because this is our responsibility to protect, I do understand that it's under Park and Rec management, but it's our responsibility to protect this resource and as habitat. That's under our bylaw. So from my point of view, we have places you can't swim because the Board of Health says they're protecting humans, right? Because the water quality isn't acceptable. We need to protect the habitat, right? And we need to protect the aquatic environment, and that's in our bylaw. And this is not protective. So I think we need to take action now. We don't need to keep talking about it because this has been going on for years and years. And I think we need to make a strong recommendation and have a vote on it that we either have a moratorium on fishing or just prohibit fishing until further notice in Hills Pond because it's small, because there have been these harms and documented harms, and there are other places to fish in Arlington. So that's my 2 cents.
Sure, and I'm going to go to David White, but I'm going to step in for a second. That the Conservation Commission should certainly. Sounds like there's a lot of interest here, and we should certainly extend this conversation. But we won't be having a vote tonight. I don't believe all the stakeholders have been brought into this conversation, and I also don't think that the agenda sufficiently describes any action for a vote. So for those 2 reasons, I'm not going to allow a vote tonight, but I encourage conversation and next steps. So with that, David White.
So I think it's primarily Park and Rec's responsibility to deal with this property. And we can encourage them to do the right thing. Also, people could contact the select board and copies to the Park and Rec, and copies to us, saying this is a problem. This is a town problem. Deal with it. Get our people involved in the whole process because it's even town meeting necessarily not possible, but the select board needs to be aware of this issue and direct people to come to a resolution.
All right, thank you, David. So it sounds like there's a problem. We've identified one pond in Arlington, and in Spy Pond, there's several areas that need to be looked at. Oh, sorry, Mike, I just saw your hand up. Why don't you chime in right now?
You're muted,
Yeah.
Mike.
Boy.
Again.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that by way of actions, we can think about for later votes, billboards that inform people what's going on at the Hills Pond. There are two stations that would accommodate that, and I think that we ought to do some education and outreach.
All right, thank you, Mike. David Morgan, our administrator.
So I've spoken with the town manager about this issue. I know Laura has too, probably many others on the call. What we discussed was trimming some limbs from the places where people are known to fish. And in particular, he's identified 2 trees with about 1 limb apiece that seem to be at issue in the Hills Pond setting. And I advised him that, you know, trimming up to 20% of the canopy is permissible without a permit under our regulations, and that he could direct DPW to do that, which is a small step. It's also a thing that we don't want to do at a larger scale, shall we say. We're not trying to limb every tree around the pond. We're not trying to remove vegetation from the pond. Naturally, that would be sort of contrary to our efforts here. So I think, there is a minor step being taken, and I just wanted to inform the group of that activity.
All right, David. So I see that Beth, I was gonna ask you about a question about trimming and who monitors that, but I might get down a different road there. So I'm gonna go to Beth. Beth has her hand up.
Thank you. I reported to Laura Kiesel that there was a dead drowned heron in the pond. An assortment of birders and environmentalists from the neighborhood, people that I contacted after conferring with a neighbor to Menominee Rocks Park, who we determined who would be the best person to contact. So we contacted David Bean and Laura Kiesel about this, and Laura was able to deploy her SWAT team, but it ended up being some neighbors helping to get the bird out of the water. Laura can tell you more if you want to know. The point is, you have a lot of really upset, traumatized birders, people who go to the pond. This is not the first waterfowl, as Laura's explained to you, that's died from fishing line. I wrote that day to Jim Feeney with the photographs, and I asked him to use his authority as town manager. We have the municipal arrangement that the town manager has a lot of authority, independent, to use his authority for a pause while the staff in town hall figure out what to do. I think there have been some very good suggestions tonight. I think the fact that it's in your bylaw and it's incumbent upon the Conservation Commission to protect habitat, I think personally I'd like to see you protect some habitat. You've got the frog project going on at Menominee Rocks Park in one of the vernal streams. So you're protecting frogs. I would like, for Christ's sake, we're in climate breakdown and we're losing species daily. It's a small thing. It's a tiny pond. Pause fishing here. It's within your power. We still have fishing at the Mystic Lakes, the Mystic River, and Spy Pond, where it can't be paused because they're administered by the state. Laura hasn't shared all the photos with you. The one, once they got the bird out of the water, it's truly horrific. And if I sound upset, it's because I was on the scene when MK, the bald eagle, was picked up off the ground when she was in her death throes. So we're a privileged community in that we are host to a nesting pair of bald eagles and these other great migratory waterfowl. I live in Arlington Center, beneath the flight path for the great blue heron when they go from the Mystic Lakes to Menotomy Rocks Park. We need to respect this privilege that we have and protect them. It's an inconvenience to change our behavior, but I think it's worth it. I think it's incumbent upon us to do so. Thank you for listening to me.
All right, so we have some other hands. Oh, actually, I see one. Eric, do you want to unmute your microphone and introduce yourself for the record?
Sure, thanks. Eric Pohl, Lake Street, Arlington, Massachusetts, and I'm here to speak in favor of the moratorium on fishing at Hills Pond. Like others have said, there are other places where folks can fish. Hills Pond is a recreational fishing spot only, so it's not, there are no subsistence fisher people there. But more than that, I want to comment on a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to say that, and I'll keep everything short out of respect for everyone's time. But first of all, I think that for every person with a fishing rod that you see there are probably 10 or 20 people who are not, and who are there for birds or for natural wildlife, and for whom the death of a heron or a kingfisher or songbirds would mean a lot. I, for one, avoid places where animals have died tragically and for preventable reasons, because it causes grief, right? The bald eagles in the cemetery, the family of owls at Menotomy Rocks Park. It's difficult to go back there after I know that they died from preventable reasons. So I think the people who fish are very visible. Those of us who go to these places and who would mourn preventable losses are probably, I'm estimating 10 times as many as the people who fish there. Second of all, you think about pushback from us. Second of all, I just wanted to talk about the habitat for songbirds there. So I want to be really cautious when people talk about cutting back tree branches that could be habitat for songbirds. So please, I know you're trying to do the right thing, but make sure to consult with folks who understand that habitat, so that you can do the things that make sense for the birds and not cut back their habitat in the hopes of protecting them. Thanks. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I understand that Luci's husband would like to speak, and he's online right now. So introduce yourself for the record, please.
Oh yeah, hi. Thanks, I appreciate it. Tim Keefe, Luci's husband. I just been connected through Luci, obviously, but I was so I'm a fisherman recreationally, and really have a passion for it. But and I have been fishing in Spy Pond, and it's very challenging to actually fish there because of the all the brush and the branches and the trees. I don't like to go there. There's no access, really good access to cast your fishing line. So I mean, my point is that I consider myself experienced recreational fisher, but if kids are fishing in there, they're going to get snagged, and they're going to have lines that are stuck out there, and it's just going to happen. I mean, it happened to me. So if it happened to me, I'm any kid that's out there, I'm sure this is at some point or another it's going to happen. And but yeah, I mean, if I'm not fishing there, I mean, I would absolutely go for the moratorium on Spy Pond. I'm sorry, not Spy Pond,
Hills Pond.
at Hills Pond. But yeah, I mean, as long as we have Spy Pond and Horn Pond and all that, But anyway, that's all. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Sharon, can you unmute yourself and introduce yourself for the record?
Hi, yes, I'm Sharon Kershane, and I'm an abutter of Anatomy Rocks Park. I'm also a veterinarian licensed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I have facilitated the necropsy of the most recent heron there, as well as many other wildlife over the past several months. And I just wanted to register my support for the moratorium, and I agree with everything Beth said, in particular that it's important to protect this habitat. And we do have recreational places for fishing, and Spy Pond would be a good alternative for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura, I see that your hand's up. Is this a new information? Because I did want to get back to the commission and try to figure out where the commission wants to go from
Well, I
here.
just wanted to react to new news tonight. So I just hearing about the plan to potentially trim back the tree line. Is it okay if I just very briefly respond
Sure.
to that? So I don't, I'm trying to read my slides quick, but again, I guess Eric briefly mentioned it, but Save Arlington Wildlife does not really want to see like songbird habitat shrunk, especially during the height of the migratory season. But again, I'm also worried in a pond so small and already so extremely susceptible to drought and algae outbreaks. I feel like taking even a very minor part of the shade away puts more pressure on the wildlife there. And I'm just concerned about that. And I don't want to see us trying so hard to accommodate the recreational fishers who do have other options that again, you're alienating those who are worried more there for birding or there for walking and would like to be able to enjoy that area. So that's just what I want to say. I just really hope people will think about it as a habitat perspective, because I don't really think we should be losing treescape there because of how vulnerable that pond is and how pressured the wildlife are.
All right, thank you. All right, so it looks like David went to the town manager and talked over options, but I guess the only thing that came out of that meeting was just to trim back some trees, hopefully under the conservation's supervision. And I'm not sure that's been approved yet by the Conservation Commission. So that probably would need some more discussion. I know we allow a certain amount of trees to be trimmed. And the other thing that I heard in this discussion was that Park and Recs actually took this up and started a committee. And I'm wondering, what happened to that? Why didn't it gain any traction? And it did seem like they're also on the same page. I would like to suggest that we come back to this at our next meeting. We reach out to Park and Recs, find out what they think about this potential vote that's going to come up tonight or at the next meeting. Get it on the agenda in a way that everyone understands is going to be discussed. So fishing moratorium at Hills Pond and vote would be the way I would like to see it. Then with all that information, we could come back and have a real discussion and conclude it with a vote. So I see David White's hands up first, and Nathaniel, I see that your hand's up also, but I'm going to go to David White.
I'm not sure we have the authority to ban fishing at the pond. I think it's Park and Rec property and they have to decide. We can recommend strongly things and get the town manager involved. But I think we have limited authority actually doing things in terms of what authority we do have.
Sure.
Definitely sounds like a good idea, but I'm not sure best way to implement it.
Yeah, I think we heard from Susan Chapnick tonight. I know that she believes that we have the authority. I'm going to turn to Nathaniel before I jump into it myself and see if he has anything to say about our jurisdiction over habitat alteration, and degradation.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I was going to just suggest, I guess, two comments. I think probably what happened is the working group sort of died when Joe left, perhaps, and then Natasha didn't pick it up. I mean, she had a lot to jump into last fall, but she's been in the job, and I recall several commission members, Chuck, Susan, and I used to rotate and go to the Park and Rec Commission meetings. But the idea was to then instead have David meet with Natasha monthly. So I'm curious as to how those meetings are going. I think Chuck, we might want to add that as a weekly report to our meeting agenda. But I would suggest first step is for him to raise this issue with her to try to get some traction there. And yes, I was trying to contemplate our authority as well. I think under the bylaw, I mean, if we were treating this more as a like project by project, we would be issuing enforcement orders against each angler at the pond, which will be a little bit difficult. So the next best thing I can think of, and again, David and I can talk with town council about this. We have a meeting set up next week on another matter. But all I can think of is that we would amend our regulations to somehow prohibit fishing or the use of certain fishing equipment because I don't think we can necessarily prohibit the activity outright, but I'd have to think about that further. But I had the same sort of question in my mind that David White did, because we don't prohibit, we require people to have permits to do things, and we can turn down that permission, but we don't have the jurisdiction, say like Park and Rec does, to in a management other than on our own conservation land.
Your conservation land, yes.
Our own conservation land. So one step we could do actually is, as I'm speaking, is we could amend our regulations so that no fishing is allowed on conservation land, and that would cover Window on the Mystic. I don't know how much fishing activity is happening on Mystic Lake, but that would be an easy thing to do. But in terms of Hills Pond and Spy Pond too, I'm curious. We didn't hear anything about any wildlife mishaps or deaths at the other water bodies like McLennan Park or David White. Remind me of the res.
At the res,
sure.
I checked. There's not much at the res in terms of that happening. Maybe some instances, but it doesn't seem to be a problem like at Hills Pond.
Sure, but I think in terms of next steps, what we want to do is see first ascertain what our authority is, and then have a public hearing about exercising our authority, either however way we do that, and have a full public hearing about this so we can hear from all potential affected parties. Thanks.
Yeah, so Nathaniel, just to talk about the regulations for a second, so under section 9, our definitions, wildlife habitat. Unlike the WPA, it's not special or protected animals, it's any animal in our regulations. I think the habitat, you could make a argument that the habitat is being altered and degraded at Hills Pond, and
I agree. Yeah, I agree. But do we issue an enforcement order against Park and Rec for allowing this activity to go forward? I mean, these are the types of things. Or do we get out there and ticket each angler who's there when we see them doing that?
So I don't think we do have the right to prevent fishing. I don't think we could stop it altogether, but I do believe that we could use like habitat restoration practice, where we would prevent for a certain amount of time to allow this restoration to happen. I think that's pretty common, around the state, and it would be a way to, no one's asking us to stop fishing, but they are asking for a moratorium, and I think that that's certainly achievable. If the commission, I also wanted to tell the commission that if we were wondering what's our authority, we would have to find that out if someone issued or submitted an RDA, and they could ask if we had authority to stop the fishing. But I don't think that's needed. It sounds like Park and Rec, it's on the same wavelength as conservation. I just don't want it to take a long time. I think, we're getting into efficiencies, and now that was an alarming amount of bobbers and lines and whatnot that people pulled out, and I was surprised that we were told that that was every day you can pull out that amount. So I'm looking to find out where you want to go from here, what the next agenda may look like. If anyone has a suggestion, I see that David Morgan's hand is up.
My thoughts about coordinating with Park and Rec and also the health department. We regularly in recent years see harmful algal blooms, as Laura pointed out earlier, at Hills Pond. Shuts down the pond for many weeks out of the summer, and there should be no activity, no access to the water, no touching the water, etc., because of the cyanotoxins in water. I mean, it can damage human and animal health, etc., other animal health. And so just a thought that we might want to further restrict access to the pond given the water quality conditions. You know, if it really does become a matter of public health when that's occurring. My other thought is about coordinating with Park and Rec or the Rec department. When we were thinking, I think this started a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, about transferring property and the management responsibilities of certain public lands. We didn't talk about water bodies, but did talk about certain parcels and whether Park and Rec should have jurisdiction, or the Conservation Commission, or even the town manager's office, historic commission, etc. And ultimately where town council has come down on that matter is that there's no need to change the deeds or any of the paperwork that's existing per se, but rather you can develop essentially a memorandum of understanding between two town bodies that allows the other to have jurisdiction. I use that term very loosely. So I wonder if, given that we already manage Hills Pond, the water itself might be something that we discuss with Rec or the Rec department and say, you know, we would like to have domain here, so to speak, and, you know, make our decision accordingly. So just throwing out a thought.
Yeah, but we'd probably want to do that after we get the go ahead on the moratorium, or to see where they're going, because that sounds like it would be a longer conversation because it looks like you might be going, you know, past the water, up the bank, out into the buffer. Anyways, thanks, David, for that information. And Brian McBride, any thoughts on what we should do for our next meeting?
Yeah, I think time is of the essence, Chuck, as you mentioned. We have this tragedy with the iconic bird dying. So there's a great opportunity for education and awareness. If we're going to leverage it, we should do it quickly. So I just wanted to chime in that a vote next week on a moratorium sounds really sensible to me. It would be great to have PRC's collaboration. They may be happy for us to take the lead on this particular issue. And it sounds like there's a strong sentiment on the commission, our commission, to do that. So it seems like it may work out in a collaborative way with PRC.
Yeah, I see us heading towards a vote, but we want to check out jurisdiction, time frame, authority, and make sure that we have the approval of the Park and Recs committee, at least their knowledge. Now, you know, I'm not saying that, not one bit would I say that they have. We can do whatever we want within our jurisdiction. So, but I don't want to, for this here, for tonight, because of the agenda and how it's written, I think we're off to our next meeting anyways. Susan Chapnick?
Just very briefly, thanks, Chuck. I do understand not voting tonight. However, the commission seems to be in agreement that this is an issue that needs to be addressed soon. I think I've heard everybody speak that they are in agreement that a moratorium might be the best approach. I'm not saying do a vote, but I'm saying maybe we can do a letter of support or to Park and Rec, to town manager, et cetera, even before vote. A letter of support saying that we've heard the evidence. We think there should be a moratorium. We're going to have a public meeting on this at this date, and put that letter out there so that this moves, because the needle hasn't moved. We keep saying, okay, it's Park and Rec's purview, you know, the needle's not moving, and it's been years. So I'm just wondering if maybe a letter from the Conservation Commission supporting this approach and saying we're going to have a public meeting about this approach, you know, on this date might be helpful to move this along.
I'm just going to go to Nathaniel Stevens.
Yeah, just following up on that, I'm online and I see the Park and Rec Commission next meets on the 13th, which is not next week. I don't have a calendar in front of me. Sorry.
That's Tuesday, isn't it?
It's the week after next.
It's the week after next. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's the Tuesday before our next meeting, actually. So 2 days before our next meeting. Well, yeah, that makes sense because Laura said she was there 2 nights ago. They meet on Tuesday nights. So I'm strongly supportive of Susan's letter to Park and Rec. We can enclose a copy of Laura's presentation and copy the town manager maybe on that letter to Park and Rec and saying, you know, look, this is brought to our attention. We're shocked by it. We'd like to work with you to address it, including having a temporary, I think we need to phrase it as a temporary moratorium at least at Hills Pond and till the end of the year. I'd assume that would be I don't think a lot of people fish in the winter, even if the pond's not frozen, but and less birds around. So that'd be my suggestion in terms of building on Susan's excellent idea. And then meanwhile,
Well,
I
let's
can
do that.
work with town council to see what additional authority we might have.
David Kaplan, we haven't heard from you tonight. So.
Yep, I thought I may as well chime in. No, I'm just curious. I'm sympathetic. I think there's a real need for action on this, but I'm just curious what will happen during this temporary moratorium. Will there be a study to see if fishing can continue to be allowed in designated areas, or is it, is the goal ultimate outright? I mean, are we just going to look at options? Are we going to recommend a ban? So I think if we're going to recommend a moratorium, I think we need to be a little bit more articulate about what's going to happen during that period. Thank you.
Here, I agree with you.
And David White. David White.
Also think about enforcement too. How it's going to be enforced if the moratorium is imposed.
Yeah, that question did come up. I don't know how that's going to happen.
It'll happen as well as dogs on a leash.
Mike's hand is up too.
I'm being facetious.
Mike's been ignored.
I
think it would be
one quick note that I
Mike.
support Susan's idea of a letter. In that letter, I would talk about moratorium. I would not mention the issue of branch trimming at all because I don't like that idea, but for several reasons. But I would also address the issue of enforcement just by mentioning. I think we need to do a little homework beforehand on both who owns what and who has authority to regulate, and then also enforcement. I think that needs to be in the letter somehow. And I would suggest a small group of Susan and David Morgan, maybe, and Chuck, figuring out how to write that letter.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. So I think the letter is a great idea. My caution is about how the commission and the recreation department have interacted before, and I think instead of putting a letter in front of them, my thought was to have David have a conversation, bring this up, and let them know that this was going to happen, and we would, invite them to our next meeting to have a conversation, or maybe a conversation happen. I'm okay with the letter. I'm just saying, I understand
That's
the
a good
group
idea, Chuck. I agree.
the
Before
group
the
we're
letter
sending
goes
it
out.
to. It would almost be better for us if we had the Recreation Commission reenact or kind of get their committee back together, and then we got involved and were as a part of that committee also, and then the two groups could kind of get on this conversation at the same time. So that was my thought, but I like I said, I'm okay with the letter if that's the way you want to go. We have David talking to Natasha now. I'm sure that that will also help.
Yeah.
You have a meeting every once in a while, and I'm sure David can reach out also.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe this is too early for a strongly worded letter. I think we want to understand whether or not they're going to be willing to pick this up and work with us and potentially reestablish this committee. So thank you.
All right. Where's the commission stand? Are we going to send a letter, or are we going to hold off? I
I'll
think
make a
the letter-
motion. I'll make a motion to send a letter to the Park and Rec Commission telling them that we heard the presentation, that we've understood that there was a working group in the past about this issue, that we would like to work with the Park and Recreation Commission to see about addressing this issue, and that it will be that we plan to discuss it further at our next meeting on the 15th, I guess it is. And therefore we invite them to all or some or all of them to attend. And I guess before the letter gets sent, I would suggest that David Morgan reach out to Natasha and give her the heads up that this is coming.
Should we let them
We should mention them
know
in
that
the
we
moratorium
possibly
if
could
it
vote?
raises the possibility, I think.
We'll discuss what we might suggest, and in that we could say, for example, perhaps a moratorium, but I think addressing the issue. But I think David Kaplan or whoever made the suggestion, we don't want to impose ideas on Park and Recreation. We say we want to work with them quickly to address this issue as soon as possible.
That's the issue, yes.
All right, I like that idea. The only thing we didn't cover is at our next meeting, are we going to vote on
I'll
anything?
second that letter.
Hold off, David.
Okay.
Nathaniel, are you adding in we're going to vote on our next meeting, or is that something that
Well,
we'll hold off on?
I don't think you need to tell them what we're going to do. We're going to say we're going to discuss it, and we're just going to discuss it and see and take any action related there too, or something. You can leave it. You can say it's going to be a public hearing about what we might do, and hopefully by then we will know what authority we have to even take a vote to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so put it in the hearing section. All right, second, David. I'm going to say David second. I'll get that
David
going.
White. Yep.
Yeah, David White seconded. Susan Chapnick.
Yes.
David Kaplan.
Yes.
Brian McBride.
Yes.
Mike Gildersgame.
Yes.
Nathaniel Stevens.
Yes.
David White.
Yes.
And Chuck Tirone says yes. All right.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Very powerful.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Beth.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, everybody. Appreciate everything.
All right. Moving right along, we have a little presentation. Is Jackie, or is this David that's going to do this? It's about e-signature authorization.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jackie.
So I had spoke with David about the option for e-signature authorization, just to make issuing permits electronically easier for us in the conservation office. I am recommending that the commission make a motion to accept the provisions of MGL Chapter 110G regarding electronic signatures. And this would allow us to then record a notarized certificate of vote stating that we voted on this, and then we can then put that language into our permits when we have them signed electronically by roll call vote at our meetings.
Great. Any discussion or motions?
So moved.
Second? A second?
Oh, second.
Okay.
Any
I think that
negatives
was
also with
Brian,
this?
Brian McBride. David, what's that, David White?
Are there any also negatives associated with this? Is there some?
No,
No, it's
No.
efficiency. It's a,
I'm just wondering whether any
No.
consequences we might have.
no,
No.
shouldn't be. Other commissions have been doing this since
Okay.
COVID.
So we have a vote to accept the provisions of MGL Chapter 110G regarding electronic signatures. Susan Chapnick.
Yes.
Did I hear someone? Okay, Susan Chapnick. David Kaplan.
Yes.
David White.
Yes.
Brian McBride.
Yes.
Mike Gilderscane.
Yes.
Nathaniel Stevens.
Yes.
And Chuck Teroni says yes. Great. Great, great, great. Okay, so here's something else from our staff. It's floodplain regulations. We're going to get an update from David Morgan about the floodplain regulations.
So y'all will remember that we had the need to put the FEMA required language for our floodplain National Flood Insurance Program statute, let's call it, into the regulations versus our zoning. And we are set to do that. We've looked it over, Jackie and I, and corresponded with the representative responsible for overseeing our implementation of the new language, and we have an authorization from them to include the language that we've drafted in the regs. So credit to Jackie for drafting that language. And the update is really just to say that this is the stage we're at, and that we'll bring the language to a vote at the next meeting. So just want you to pay close attention to those materials. Also know that the body responsible for overseeing it has approved them, and hopefully we can do this minor change to the regs. Minor as in it's not a full regulations change, but if that is acceptable, then we will notice it and make sure that we've dotted the I's and crossed the T's in order to adopt the new language. So Jackie, before we turn it over, is there anything you want to add about the process or anything?
Yeah, it's pretty standard language that we worked in. What's required under the model floodplain bylaw with a few minor modifications just to adapt it to our regulations. And I think it makes sense, and I'm glad that Eric reviewed it and approved our changes.
Sure. It's so David, before you turn it over, just turn it back to me, because I just want to make sure that the people with their hands up understand that we're just being alerted to look at information that's in our packet. So I wouldn't like to talk about things twice, because we'll be discussing this in length at our next meeting. So with that, Nathaniel Stevens.
Thanks. Yeah, no, just two suggestions to make the next meeting go better. Jackie and David, consider adding some language to section 1 of our regulations, introduction, which is the authority. I think you need to, just as a drafting matter, you need to say that section, is it 33, 35 is promulgated pursuant to blah, 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 in there, and also under the purpose as well. Also consider having a sunset provision for section 35. I don't know, maybe give it 2 years or something, because hopefully by the following town meeting, it will be adopted. And then my third point was, I assume we're going to have a hearing notice, duly public hearing to amend, because it's amending the regulations. So just want to make sure that that's teed up.
So that's just once in the newspaper?
I think so. Yeah, once, and certainly public notice. Yep. So probably newspaper notice. You need that. We can read the bylaw and see what that says. But I definitely think we need to tweak the introduction, section 1 of the regulations to match and explain why section 35 is there, the floodplain
Great.
section.
I think those are great points, and that would have slowed us down next week or at the next meeting. Susan Chapnick.
So on the same vein as Nathaniel, I looked at other sections, and I think it's going to slow us down even more if we don't make coordination with our other sections. So section 2, which is jurisdiction, we need to put, either reference this as jurisdiction, because we don't have jurisdiction. Section 4, which are definitions. I see that there are definitions within this new floodplain section, so maybe just put them in there and say, see the floodplain section, because we do that for some other definitions, but we don't have them. And then we have to, we already have a definition for structure, so we have to make sure there's 2 structure definitions. One's just for floodplain and one's for other things. So that's section 2 and section 4. Section 29 talks about variances, but the floodplain has its own variance, regulations. So we have to make sure the language is correct, either add something else in variances to say, except for floodplain, see section 35. And then this is something I'm going to ask when we talk about it in depth, because maybe I just don't understand it, but I don't see the standards. I don't see what our conservation agent is evaluating. Are they just saying no activity in floodplain, period? Or there's some standards? And then there are saying that, use hydrogeological, but it's not clear. What standards are they pointing to? Now, maybe because this was pulled out of something else, those standards and those regulations and references to what you're actually evaluating is somewhere else. And if that's somewhere else, then let's make sure we have a reference there, because I don't see the way it's written how David could evaluate these projects. And I assume that David then issues the permit, not the building department on these. That, I don't know if that needs to be clear. So those were my concerns about when we talk about it again. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, David, both Nathaniel and Susan made great points. I would not want to put this back on the agenda until all of that has been resolved. And it may be our next agenda, but if not, we're going to have to push it out. So with that, I'm going to turn to Brian McBride.
Oh, trivial question. And on the version I opened, I didn't see a markup what changes had been made. Is there such a version, or maybe I didn't need to open it in Word or something?
So I showed the
Just that
changes
section.
in
Yeah.
blue text. So it's mainly the section 35, and then there's also in the table of contents. So it's in
Oh, that's all.
blue text.
Okay, that's easy then. Thank you.
All right, so Mike Gilderscame.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring to the commission's awareness, I don't think it's a conflict of interest in any way, but Eric Carlson was on my staff when I worked for the state those years ago, and I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And like I said, I don't believe it's a conflict of interest, but just wanted to make you aware.
Well, thanks, Mike.
I don't know if that means I should vote or shouldn't vote upon it when it comes to that point, but I just wanted you to be aware.
Yeah, I think whether you want to recuse yourself or not is entirely up to you. If you feel like you could be fair with your vote, then
He's
just
a good guy.
just letting me know that there's letting the commission know that there's conflict is all you need to do. Nathaniel Stevens.
Sorry, just quickly, given the additional good issues that Susan raised, David and Jackie, you might consider to see if we could promulgate these as a separate set of regulations so they don't conflict, so they don't end up appearing to conflict with these. So just a thought, stick it in its own set of regulations, but I can speak with you guys further offline on that one. But it might be easier just trying to, instead of trying to mix it into this temporarily, because I can see it creating headaches, but there's also ways to draft around that too. So happy to help.
Yeah, I think
I
that'd be
agree
a
with
good
Chuck.
idea.
I think I don't think it's ready for next meeting for a hearing. I think we're gonna create a train wreck if we do, potentially.
No, it's good to bring
Sorry,
it back.
it's a little severe, but yeah, we could have a potential problem.
Yeah, we don't want to. Were you going to say we don't want a flood of questions? Okay. Yeah, thanks. And there's time. Is there time, David Morgan? We can go a couple meetings on this. I mean, we want to get it right. We want to talk about it once. That would be my preference. Get it right, talk about it once, and then move on. And I think this is really good that we kind of brought it up for a little preview tonight. Okay, is that it? Are we ready to move on? Jackie looks like she's ready to move on. David, same. Okay, Water Bodies Working Group, David White.
Well, spring has come.
Oh, and Susan Chapnick's going to leave the meeting right now. Just note the agenda.
30.
The minutes. Sorry.
Okay, water bodies. Well, spring has come. We're monitoring and treating water bodies now. I think we're treating Spy Pond this week, David, is that correct?
Survey for Spy Pond will happen tomorrow, and treatment to be scheduled thereafter. We need to lower the water levels, which I'm sure Brad Barber will undertake as soon as he's able. So wheels are in motion for treatment.
Okay. And Hills Pond's already been monitored, right?
Monitored and
And
treated.
the reservoir.
Yep.
Pardon?
Monitored and treated.
Good. And the reservoir water chestnut harvesting starts in June. So those are the and the story about McLennan Park.
They
That
were
study.
out there today, as a matter of fact. They were there from 9 to 2. They completed the survey. They're taking it back to do desktop analysis and put together some modeling and so forth. I expect I could see something as soon as next week for that. And we'll need to do more analysis to follow for sedimentation rates and things like that, but the sort of preliminary depths and so forth will be known at that point.
So a lot of progress. Great. Anything else? Okay, we're keeping busy.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have a lot on your plate. Okay, we're going to move on to CPA liaison. That's Brian McBride.
So the CPA final budget should be approved by town meeting any minute now. I'm not sure which day it falls on, but it should be soon. I don't expect any pushback. And I did see them working on Foot of the Rocks project across from Dunkin' Donuts. So that's underway. That's the only news I have, Chuck.
Great, I appreciate that. So we have the tree committee update, and that's Sarah Alfaro Franco.
Yes. We had last month's meeting was on April 9th. And two quick things. The tree warden let us know that over 200 trees had been delivered, and they were in the middle of planting them, probably planted by now. So they were a mix of large, medium, and small trees. So that's good news. And the other thing was they had an update on the community tree canopy program, and they reported that 48 out of 60 trees had been sold, and there were 20 people on the waiting list. The enthusiasm was for smaller trees. So, and the next meeting will be held on May 14th. And they're going to be meeting an hour earlier because of town meeting. But that's it.
David White, please.
There's also
Is
been
this
some,
a,
pardon?
I was just wondering if it's for Sarah.
Yes.
Is this for Sarah? This question you're asking, David?
I was going to comment of other tree projects going on.
Oh,
okay.
Hurd Field has some ongoing activity to deal with the trees that were planted there for the that project, and David Morgan on top of that. So basically, there's some work going on there with the trees at Hurd Field.
okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
I had a question for Sarah. Do you know if the town is planting more trees than they're removing each year? Do they report on that? Does the town tree warden give a report?
You
I think
know,
that's a requirement of being like Tree City USA or one of them.
I will find out.
Oh, thank you.
Chuck, I had a question.
Oh, sorry. Mike Gildersgame.
Yes, Sarah, the 200 trees that were purchased, are they a variety of species? Do you know what they were?
I don't know. These 200 trees were part of the $125,000 dollar award that was actually initiated by our own David Morgan. But I don't know the variety of trees. David, do you know?
I don't. It always varies depending on what's available at the nurseries and so on and so forth. So
Obviously, all native species.
no.
You know what they plant?
But it is,
I think that's the goal, but I'm not absolutely sure that's the case. So
yeah,
but I will find out.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's a list you would find typically at the Arnold Arboretum. So it's, forested street tree or landscape tree. They're all in there. So if that's all the tree questions for tonight, okay.
Quick question.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Jackie, do you know what the list of trees were that were planted? Do you happen to know that?
I can't name exactly what they were, but I know it was a variety of different species. At least some of them were native, but I don't think all of them are because some of them need to be street trees, which are very limited options of what can survive as a street tree.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. All right. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption, Chuck.
No problem. Okay, so moving right along, this is for Nathaniel Stevens. I don't know if there's a report from Sims, but if there is.
The report was we were supposed to meet yesterday or the day before, but one of the members had to postpone, so we're meeting next week. So I should have a report at our meeting on the 15th or an update.
Okay.
And I guess I would reiterate my request to add to the updates report from David Morgan about anything from Park and Rec for future meetings if he does everything now.
Yeah, David, would you have is that twice a month you'd be able to report? Do you meet that frequently with Natasha and Park and Rec?
I can add it into the agenda for next time. I haven't met with Natasha this month, but we've been corresponding. David alluded to the Hurd Field tree issues and so forth, so I can certainly give more.
Yeah, I think with Hills Pond on there, we can at least ask you if any progress has been made. So sounds like it's a good idea, and maybe we'll in the future it'll only be once a month. But sure, good suggestion. I think that we talked about that before. And David White has his hand up.
But one time we had people attending the Park and Rec meeting. Is that going to happen again?
We decided, those of us who were attending decided that we would try to turn to having David Morgan meet with the director. But I think we said we'd be watching the agenda to show up, I think to show up if we saw anything urgent, but we kind of hoped that we would get the heads up, I think, through David and Natasha's meetings or communications when Park and Rec felt it would be helpful to have someone from Concom there.
Just a liaison, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we were dealing with a lot of non-Conservation Commission issues, as interesting as they were, but it was getting to be a bit much.
Yeah, I think it was a pilot program. If it, we're going to monitor the agenda, like Nathaniel said, but if it works out better, because I don't think you're going to the meetings, though, David, right? You're just talking to Natasha. Yeah, so it's a different approach. If it doesn't work, we'll probably try to figure out what 3 people want to step up and do that again. So I think that's how I see that. Now, Mike, did you have your hand up? Did you want to say something? Okay, so I'm going to move along to the public hearing, and so that's the public hearing section of tonight's meeting. And so DEP file number 910367, notice of intent for 995 Massachusetts Ave. Do we have confirmation on this, David Morgan, that they would like to continue? Yes.
Yeah, this is at the request of the applicant.
Sure.
And did I, sorry, before I move, did we get a copy of that NOI? Why am I just blanking on this and not seeing it?
David sent out all the application material in an email for this meeting. There was nothing posted. So
yeah, I didn't see anything on the Google. I didn't see a link to the Google Drive on his email.
Yeah, this was continued from a prior meeting. I want to say the first meeting in April, maybe. And we said that they should come back. This is the condo association that's involved with the enforcement matter on Dudley Street.
Oh, this one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Come back when you've resolved the enforcement matters. So in conversation with the representative, we decided let's push.
Okay, sorry. I may have missed that meeting. So sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple issues we wanted them to close out. So this is up in the air whether we're going to be listening to this or not. So with that,
I'll move to continue to the meeting on the May 15th.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, I didn't see who that was. Oh, David Kaplan. David Kaplan seconds. Susan Chapnick's gone. So David White.
Yes.
Brian McBride.
Yes.
Mike Gildersgame.
Yes.
Nathaniel Stevens.
Yes.
David Kaplan.
Yes.
And Chuck Tirone says yes. Okay, well, that's the end of our agenda. I see a couple people here. I don't know if you would like to ask the Conservation Commission some questions at the end of the meeting, public open session. If you do, just raise your hand or turn your camera on and ask away. If not, I'm going to wait a few minutes and ask for a motion to adjourn at 8:44. Seeing no hands, I get a motion. Oh, I see Mike Gildersgame had his hand up.
He's motioning.
Is that a motion? Okay, great.
I'll
So we
second
have a second. All right. I'm going to do the famous wave. If everyone's in favor, just wave. We're good.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. That was unanimous, by the way. Thank you. We'll see you at the next meeting.
Right.